3 ways to increase your net worth.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I am so excited about this show, maybe more excited about this show than any others, because today we're going to talk about one of our absolute most favorite things in the whole entire world.
You could call it a family tradition.
It is a family tradition.
We definitely enjoy the just updating, putting the assets in, the liabilities, seeing what's changed in the net worth statement. This is going to be pretty powerful stuff, because if you've wondered, how do I turn on the engine to actually start creating wealth, and how do I have measurable instances to know how well I'm doing or where I'm struggling, this is going to be your hookup.
And we're going to take it even a step further. We now have a tool available that you can use to make this a tradition that you get to do every single year. You can go check it out at learn.moneyguy.com. Now, Brian, I think it's really interesting. So to understand net worth and what that is and how it works, you really have to understand a very simple equation that you many years ago, when you went to accounting school, I think that's what it was called, you learned this equation, and it was...
You could call me a pup. I was at the University of Georgia. I was just a wee pup at the University of Georgia.
You learned this equation in accounting class. Assets equals liabilities plus equity. That's like accounting 101 when you think about a balance sheet, right?
Yep.
Like that's the way you sort of approach it. Well, that's the way that accountants learn that equation. But when it comes to personal finance, we like to switch it around a little bit. Instead of focus on assets equal, we would like to say equity equals assets minus liabilities.
Yeah.
But we're still using a lot of terms in there that might be confusing to normal folks. So we tried to make it much more simple, much more money guy-esque in terms of how we think about this. And it essentially is your net worth is equal to all of the things that you own minus all of the money that you owe.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really simple way to think about it.
Yeah, it is. I love that you brought this back to accounting terms, because it is one of those things when I think about to be a great investor, you want to know how healthy is the balance sheet and the income statement and the other financial documents. Well, the same thing happens with personal finances, that so many times we focus on how much income people make. And I'm telling you, the income statement is never where your wealth lies. Wealth is, when you're talking about true wealth creation, it's silent and it resides on that net worth statement with that key part of the equation that Bo said. It's what you own minus what you owe. So it really is the net takeaway that you get to keep and what financial independence is built off of.
So when it comes to building and specifically growing your net worth, we think there are really 3 distinct ways to do that. And that's what we're going to walk through with you. What are the 3 ways that you can grow your net worth? And the first one is pretty easy. It's the one that I think most people get excited about. It is increase your assets. Add to the asset side of the equation for you.
Bo, this sounds like a Captain Obvious statement. Well, of course, if we add to our assets. But I want to go a little deeper into this, is that how do we actually turn this into what is going to be the primary driver for the typical person's annual asset growth?
Yeah, so when you go and do your net worth statement and you're adding into it, most folks, the way that you see that grow year over year is through your savings.
Yeah.
The dollars that you are understanding where you're going to defer gratification, put money into your portfolio to grow for you, and you see your investment accounts go up due to savings. That's the number one way that most people increase their assets on their annual net worth.
Now, when you say savings, we're of course also talking about investing.
Sure,
we use those terms sometimes interchangeably, but before I even talk about the investing of that money, I think we have to say, what are our peers doing? Because we have some benchmarks or some guidelines that we tell everyone that they need to aspire and even focus on getting ASAP. But what does the typical American actually save?
Yeah, so there was a study done by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis that looked at U.S. savings rates from 2010 all the way through the end of 2021. And this is what they found. The average savings rate since 2010 is only about 8.5%. And if you're out there listening to this as a podcast and you can't see the visual on the screen right now, I think that's actually artificially inflated because of COVID. I think when people were at home during the pandemic, savings rates really jumped up super high. It looks like the average is really probably closer to a little bit better than maybe 7%, somewhere in that range.
When you look at this visual, and I'm doing this for all the audio listeners, it's pretty standard. I mean, it's got a few ups and downs, but it's pretty flat to a degree. It's ranging between, looks like 6 to 8%. But then in 2020, when no one could leave their house, savings rates went through the roof. And so you can say, wow, that's great. No, it just means we locked up the American consumer.
Right.
But don't worry. As soon as we unlock the doors and unlock the economies, it's like Americans like, I got to do my patriotic duty. Let's go spend some money. So, and here's the thing. You see 8.5% and you go, well, maybe that's healthy. No, here's the thing. We tell everyone, this is not the old adage where if you get to 10%, you'll be okay for the rest of your life. Realize we don't have Social Security like Social Security is just not guaranteed to be there, especially if you're younger people, because that thing's in financial straits in a large part. Pensions, your company, you'll be lucky if you even work for the same company 5 to 6 years in the future. So the fact that you think a pension is going to be provided, they don't exist. They've gone extinct like the dinosaurs. More and more falls on your shoulders. So that's why we recommend that you need to save and invest 20 to 25% of your income, gross income, for the future.
Now, you may be saying, okay, guys, that sounds like a big number. Why do you guys say that? We actually have some numbers to substantiate our 25% goal. So let's assume that you decide to invest your money and you can earn 6% on average over your working career.
Very moderate.
And let's assume that while you're working every year, your pay goes up by about 1.5% a year, and you want to retire at 65.
Yep.
A magical thing happens when you start putting your army of dollar bills to work. If you're a 20-year-old and you start saving 25% of your gross income at 20, by the time that you get to age 65, you could retire and you would be able to replace 167% of your pre-retirement income. That's right. You could get a significant raise when you retire if you work all the way until 65.
So 2 disclaimers that I always say when we show this. I love this research that we did, but the reality is we know most people don't save 20 to 25%. Right. They're saving a little over 8% like we've talked about. And then unfortunately, most people don't find the Money Guy Show at age 20.
That's right.
It might be 25, it might be 30. So this is why we give you the grace to know that if you are a financial mutant that discovered us at age 20, you could actually lean down closer to that 15 to 20% savings rate because you should be rewarded for jumping in early.
Maybe you have a more traditional path like Brian described and that you don't start saving until you're 25 years old, but that's still pretty early for most. Well, if you start saving 25% starting when you're 25-year-old, by the time you get to retirement, you could actually replace 131% of your pre-retirement income at 65. Again, you get to retire and get a pay raise. Well, then, if you wait until you're 30, and this is kind of where the magic happens, if you wait until you're 30 to start saving, and you can consistently save from age 30 all the way until 65, and you can save 25% of your gross income, when you get to age 65, you'll be able to replace 100% of your pre-retirement income. That's it. That's where the magical 25% number comes from. It allows someone who saves for a 35-year period to replace 100% of their income when they get to retirement.
When I look at these charts, I get so jealous of all you 20-somethings that have discovered this show because you can see, truthfully, anybody under 30 who discovers this content, discovers that their army of dollar bills can be more powerful than their brains, their hands, their backs. Guys, you got a lot of grace. So don't get jealous if you look at, you got some peers that are a little bit older. You got siblings. You got aunts and uncles. You go, man, I wish I had what they have. You could. If you are discovering this content and you're under 30 years of age, I want you to see how powerful every dollar that you save, that you don't spend, can be if you just engage it to start working for you. It's really, really amazing.
So if you continue to wait, if you wait until age 35, and you save 25%, you can still replace almost 80% of your pre-retirement income. And if you wait to start saving until 40, you can still replace almost 60% of your pre-retirement income. We all know that sometimes life happens, right? We don't know what the next 5 years or 10 years or 15 years will look like. So the earlier you can figure this out, the earlier you can start saving 25%, the more options you're going to give yourself later in life. And for me, someone who's now been tracking my net worth for over a decade, decade, it is amazing to look back and see the amounts that I was saving in the mid-2000s and what they've turned into now. It is remarkable. I'm so glad that my young 20-something-year-old self figured that out. And so if you start tracking your net worth annually, especially if you use the tool that we're making available to you, then you too can watch that happen as your net worth builds over the years.
So, Bo, we talk about savings / investments because we want to put this money to work. I don't want to spend it because it is a kind of an additional subject matter, but we need to tell people who don't know how to invest. How do you get into investments if you don't know anything about investing?
Yeah, so if you're someone who's just starting out, technology has made the world a lot easier. Rather than having to figure out what do I buy, when do I buy, do I sell, it's become incredibly easy with target retirement index funds, where essentially all you have to do is figure out what year do I think I want to retire. So if you think you want to retire in the year 2050 or 2055, you would buy the Target Retirement 2055 fund or the Freedom Index 2055 fund. Right now, while you're many years away from that, it's going to be more aggressive. And then as you move closer and closer to that date, it's going to naturally adjust and become more conservative for you. It basically takes all the work away from you. So there are only two questions you have to answer. When do I think I want to retire? And how much money can I save? Focus on those two things. And when you look at your net worth statement every single year, you're going to be blown away at how the numbers grow.
So that's the basic strategy on how you get started is how much can you save? When do you need it? There's a kind of an investment. They'll do all the work by also leveraging the power of index funds. I do want to tell, because Financial Mutants, you're a curious bunch. You've probably noticed because we have, in addition to our net worth tool, we do have the financial order of operations. And a lot of you will maximize opportunities with your employer plans, with your savings, and go, by the way, I held this up briefly. Go to moneyguy.com/resources if you want to get this same free deliverable. If you need a deeper dive, you can go to learn.moneyguy.com. We actually have a really great course that will accelerate all this for you right there with the net worth template. So make sure you're checking those things out. And here's what I like after you start the process. You're going to find, after you start investing and building wealth, that you're going to have different buckets of money. You're going to have, like your employer's going to offer you some free money, and you're going to be crazy not to maximize that free money. So that's going to be what's called tax deferred, the portion that your employer puts in, and then depending upon how you do it, whether it's Roth or whether it's traditional, it's either going to be tax deferred or it's going to be tax free, which means that the money you put into the Roth options, your Roth IRAs, your Roth 401ks, and 403bs, they grow completely tax-free. We call that tax-free bucket. And then the one that's very liquid in the long term that can be your bridge account for early retirement or investments into other things is your liquid after-tax money that's in an individual brokerage or joint account. A lot of times you need to know about these three buckets so you can know how you're going to implement your goals in the long term.
What I think is wonderful is one of the things that we've put on our net worth tool right there on the dashboard is a detail each year of where your tax buckets are. How much do I have in those tax-free investments? How much do I have in the after-tax investments? How much do I have in the tax-deferred investments? And when you do this annual exercise, it will inform as you go into the next year, where should I be placing my dollars? What are the most efficient places? What are the deficiencies I have in my financial picture that I ought to be aware of, that I ought to be thinking of? So when you do your net worth statement, or if you use the net worth tool that we make available, right on the dashboard every single year, you're going to be able to see exactly where each of your three tax buckets are.
Yeah, so that's power. We had somebody write in earlier when we were doing a live stream, and it seemed like they had all their money in traditional tax deferred. They had maximized. You would be able, if you're doing this annual tradition of updating the net worth statement, you would be able to see, hey, whoa, it looks like 80% of my assets are in this traditional tax deferred account. How does that fit into my goals? I think this is going to be a great indicator so you know, hey, maybe I need to focus on not only diversifying the portfolio, but diversifying my tax buckets as well.
So most people get excited when they think about increasing their assets. They think about their savings rate, and they think about the investments that they are putting to work, their army of dollar bills that are growing. But you'll notice that's not all that exists on the asset side of the equation. We also have things like use assets, or maybe even things like illiquid assets that also can increase in value through time.
So let's talk about the use assets first.
Sure.
This is the stuff that's going to be more common that a lot of people have, our houses. Now, look, you can do what you want with how you disclose your house on the net worth tool that we've created. But I do want to give you kind of a money guy hack.
Sure.
Because we're in an inflationary period, and a lot of you guys are experiencing tremendous asset growth on paper of the houses you live in. Here's the problem. Why do I keep saying the use assets, the house you live in, is that we all know if it got really ugly out there, meaning that you lose your job or you're having market volatility, you're still going to be so thankful you have a place to shelter your family, to keep them dry when it rains outside. It's hard to eat that house. So you're going to think, well, I've got all this equity. I've got 6 figures of equity. I'll just, I can go open a home equity line. Realize market downturns, they don't like to lend on that type of debt. Also, you lose a job. They don't like to lend to people who have lost their job. So a lot of times that money is illiquid because it's a use asset. You're going to live with it. So I always recommend, and we talk about this constantly, what Bo and I do, and you can disagree with this, but this really keeps things in check on our net worth statement. We value our use assets like our house at cost. We don't put market value on there.
Meaning what we paid for them when we originally bought them. So here we live in the suburb of Nashville, Tennessee. Are we understating our net worth?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Is that okay? Absolutely. Because when we look at our net worth statements, I don't want to see how much my net worth is increasing because of my house appreciation. As it relates to my house, the only number I care about is how much of that debt am I reducing. That's what I want to see reflected on my net worth statement, not a wild fluctuation that could be way up this year and way down next year and so forth, because I can't actually turn my house into cash very rapidly.
Now, look, I'll be devil's advocate. I'll say, look, some of you out there are thinking, you know what, I'm going to retire, and I'm in a high cost of living area, and I'm going to go retire in some other geographic location in America, and I'm going to maybe even internationally. And that when I liquidate, I am going to use that capital, and that's going to be a part of my retirement. Congratulations, you have turned that use asset into now a liquid asset that will go into your retirement plan, and I will applaud that, and we can include that now as a liquid holding. But just be careful, because I have fallen a prey to this. I've fallen to this own trap. There's a lot of self-reflection in this. You don't want to have that you don't need cash reserves, or you don't need to, you can slow down on your savings because you're counting on, hey, my house appreciated $250,000 last year. Why do I, or over the last 3 to 4 years, why do I need to save more? That's a false sense of security because you're looking at paper gains versus what's really available.
Another use asset that shows up on our net worth statement that I think, in my opinion, is pretty frustrating are the things that get us from point A to point B every day. It's our automobiles, it's our cars. And you may be really, really excited thinking, oh, I bought this new car and I paid this much for it and I'm gonna put on my net worth statement at that price. And that's great. What you're gonna be shocked by is when you look at it next year and you go to Kelley Blue Book or you go to somewhere to check what the value is, you're gonna see that that asset does not go up in value. It actually goes down in value.
It's funny, Bo. This is one of those things because you and I, we designed this template. We actually use this. We use this for our own personal assets. But part of this is we had to go bring in. I brought in 15 years worth of data, and the starkest learning experience, because it was fun on the asset side, seeing the investments go up over time, even in downturns, seeing well how well did I save? So maybe it stunted the losses during that market volatility. But all my good memories of all the vehicles my wife and I have had, because we update these every year. I go on Kelley Blue Book or I go on Edmunds and I value them, and it's depressing. I know we're in unique times right now because of inflation, that it's not happening as fast as in the past. But historically, you own a car for 4 or 5 years, and you're going to lose 50 to 60% of the value. And I saw that on my net worth statement, to see the cars that you were so pleased that you had accomplished and bought this car, and then to essentially watch it go from $40,000, $30,000, $20,000, and then by the end of the time that you're getting close to getting rid of it, it's $7,000. You're like, gosh, I remember when that thing was $40,000. It's kind of depressing. Meanwhile, every asset that you have on your investments over a long-term period, you're like, wow, I remember when I put $6,000 in that Roth and now it's worth this. You will quickly see that automobiles they're not our favorite thing if you're trying to build wealth.
And look, another perfect example that falls into that category are furnishings, right? So the things that we own, that we utilize, maybe it's house decor, or maybe it's furniture, or maybe it's gadgets and toys at the house that we use on a day-to-day basis. It's okay to list those on your net worth statement. But remember, more often than not, those things are going to decrease in value over time. And again, if you really want to focus on how to grow your net worth, when you're adding to the asset side of your equation, you want to add appreciating assets, not depreciating assets, so much as you can control it.
So we just covered use assets. We've already covered kind of an investment, liquid assets. I want to talk about some of the illiquid stuff that's out there, because I think there are going to be financial mutants that are watching this content. They see the net worth tool and they'll see that we have a section for real estate.
Sure.
And real estate, what I'm thinking here is for those of you on the financial order of operations, once you reach step 8, I'm okay because you've done the basics of getting your retirement assets, the liquid assets, the emergency reserves. If you are choosing that you want to be, there's no such thing as being a truly passive real estate investor, but you decide you're going to start doing real estate, we have a section on the tool to use that. I just caution you, I love real estate. In a section under liabilities, we'll talk about the power of leverage, but it is one of those things that you just need to know how this fits into your financial goal list so you don't get your financial order of operations cattywampus and doing it in the wrong order.
You know, another thing that a lot of people overlook when they do their net worth statement, we're amazed by this. If you're a small business owner, or maybe it's a larger business, odds are that business has some sort of intrinsic value. If you were to sell it or if you were to get rid of it, you would probably recognize some value for it depending on the business. We always think it's wild when we look at someone's net worth statement, they have their checking account listed and their 401k listed and their automobile listed. And we say, hey, where's your business? Why isn't that on there? Like, oh, I didn't think about that. That's a huge piece of what comprises your total net worth. So if you do own businesses, even if it's a small side business, but it has some sort of terminal value, we think it makes a lot of sense to enter your business interest, your business assets on your net worth statement as well.
But we just covered assets. That's the stuff that you get excited as it's growing. Here's the one that kind of, and especially the older I've gotten, the more I'm trying to simplify my life. Let's talk about some debts.
Yeah, so remember, we said there are there are 3 ways to increase your net worth. One is to increase your assets. The second one is to decrease your liabilities. Now, this is a hot take.
Yeah.
I want you guys to hear us out loud because this is not...
Are you using this right? Is it a hot take or a cold take?
It's a take. It's take. Could be hot. Could be cold. I don't know.
Tell me you're getting old without telling me you're getting old. Keep going.
You may be surprised to know that our opinion is debt is not always bad. I'm going to say that again. Debt is not always a bad thing. However, it's not always a good thing either. It's not something you ought to be careless with. It's not something you ought to be reckless with. But unfortunately, it probably is a necessary evil for most of us that is going to show up at some point in some form or fashion on our net worth statement.
I will share. I think debt is very personal. Bo and I, we've been working together 2 decades. We're going on decades. I mean, we can say that. And it's so interesting. We know we're both financial mutants, but we do have completely different worldviews towards some of these debt issues. And I blame it on also we're in different stages of life.
For sure.
Because I take into account not only the wealth creation process where you're trying to maximize every dollar that comes into your control, but you reach a level of success where you're also thinking wealth preservation. And that is if you can minimize and get rid of as much obligations in your life, simplify your life. That definitely includes getting rid of debt. And that's why we wanted to kind of go through, since this is a personal thing that will be different no matter how similarly your worldview towards money is. Just by being in different stages of life, you will have different thoughts. These are the ones that you might come across that you need to know how to handle.
Yeah, and what we want to make sure you do is that you set boundaries well so you don't get yourself into trouble. So the number one largest debt that surfaces on most people's net worth statement is their mortgage. And so we just want to give you some rules of thumb as you think about your mortgage. And when you do your net worth statement, when you put in the tool, you can assess, oh, wow, am I actually following this? The first one is that we think your mortgage can represent roughly 4 times your total annual income. And that's because of the inflated housing market. It used to be lower than that. But if you have a mortgage, it's okay for your mortgage to be about 4 times your annual household income. But you want to make sure that the debt service on that mortgage, the housing costs that you have, do not exceed 25% of your monthly gross income. If you find yourself in a situation where it does exceed that, you need to do sort of a self-evaluation to figure out, oh man, is my housing in the place that it should be for my long-term wealth building journey?
And then, so that's mortgages. I consider that. I will give that a strong, that's probably good debt.
Sure.
We even give people the grace of, if you're buying your first home, if your down payment is 3 to 5%, that's okay. Even though a lot of pundits will tell you to 20%, because I just know inflation, markets moving, and overall, real estate marketplace, mortgages, that's healthy debt.
Yep.
One that is gone from the good column to more of that gray column is student loan debt. And this is a trap to be aware of, be careful of, because there's just more and more data that comes out that says be very respectful of any student debt you have, because a lot of the rules have really tightened up. It's hard to get rid of student loan debt. You need to very much pay attention to the interest rate that's on these debts. So I want to talk about, because we've tried to give people guidance on when should you prepay your student loan debt versus kind of hanging around and letting it drag on for an extended period of time.
Yeah, so this is one of the things, student loan debt specifically, we do a deep dive on the Financial Order of Operations course. So if that's something you're interested, go to learn.moneyguy.com and check that out. But I want to kind of give you the summary, sort of the high-level overview of what we sort of walk through there. If you're someone in your 20s and your student loan interest is below 6%, you may not want to prioritize paying it off quickly, because your army of dollar bills can likely do more for you being invested than paying off that student loan interest. In your 30s, that number drops to 5%. So if you have student loan debt below 5%, maybe don't be in a hurry to pay it off. In your 40s, it drops to 4%. And then by the time you get to your 50s, we really don't want you to have any student loan debt at all. You should be satisfied there. And you're probably at that stage thinking more about your kids and paying for their college and that sort of thing.
I would encourage you, and also because a lot of you are going to have children. If you do, I have a senior in high school. I'm trying to do everything in my power to educate her and her peers. Try to just understand student loan debt is not so you can go to the grocery store and buy entertainment goods for your friends and other things. This is a very limited period of time. Try to keep your student loan debt to less than what your anticipated first year salary. If you can do that, you're going to give yourself a tremendous head start in life. And that allows me to also transition into another debt that we see. Now, this one, I definitely don't put this in the good column.
No.
This is this is one that is the world has made it, the consumer machine of America has made it where anybody can afford anything if you just extend the amortization out longer. And Daniel and I talk about this content all the time, and so do you, Bo, is that the typical car now is financed for, you would think it would be 60 months or 5 years. No. We keep going out. I think we're past 72 months at this point.
Months now.
So we're getting to where cars are they better be reliable.
Almost mortgages at this point.
If we can't pay them, we're living in the back seat of them, because they're getting amortization periods that do look like that. And that's just not healthy, guys, because cars under normal times will depreciate rapidly. They're not, it's really a stretch to even call these things investments, because how many investments do you actually have to pay to insure, pay to put fuel in? It will lose within 4 to 5 years, 50% of its value. And then, it's just, there's a lot of negativity that goes with vehicles. This is not the way to build wealth, even if it makes you look really cool.
So when you're doing your annual net worth statement and you see, oh man, I've got an auto loan that I'm putting in my liabilities column, we want to give you some little rules of thumb to walk through. The first one is, when it comes to automobiles, we want you to subscribe to 23-8. You want to put 20% down on the car. You don't want to finance it for any more than 3 years or 36 months. And your total car payments, no matter how many automobiles you own, cannot exceed 8% of your monthly gross income. And that's for normal brands. That's for your Hondas and your Toyotas and your fill in the blanks. If you're going to drive a luxury brand, that's Mercedes, BMW, I'd even throw Tesla into that category most likely, then you got to pay it off in 1 year. And you say, oh, well, guys, but man, I can't pay the Tesla off in 1 year. We would argue with you can't afford the Tesla.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what maybe you should look at a less expensive automobile. But if you can follow that 23.8, it's going to keep you inside the healthy boundary.
Now, we covered one of the key parts of the way you're going to increase your net worth is you have to make sure you're building up assets. So part of this, and you're like, we're talking about liabilities. Why are you back to assets? I need to make sure that your monthly investments, that's an asset, is much larger than your car payment, which is paying down the debt. Because it just bothers me to no end when I find out people bought a fancy car, they have $800 to $1,000 monthly payment, and don't feel good if you have a $500 payment either. But then you find out that they're putting $300 a month into their investments. That is just upside down. You need to be prioritizing the investment side, minimize those monthly payments on the debt as much as possible. That's why, if you buy a $10,000 car, that's substantially better than buying a $50,000 car finance for 6 years.
And so we've already talked about, right, you want to keep your housing expenses on your mortgage less than 25%. When you add up all of your debt service, so this is mortgages and student loans and auto payments, because those are kind of the three that we are okay seeing on a net worth statement, you want to make sure that all of that debt service does not exceed 35% of your total gross income. That's kind of your top line. We said that these are liabilities, these are debts that we kind of expect to see, we kind of understand can show up on your net worth statement. But there are a few kinds of debt, a few kinds of liabilities that if you do see them on your net worth statement, if you're going through and you're filling it out and you're like, oh yeah, I got that. Oh yeah, I got that. Oh yeah, I got that. It should be a red flag and sirens should go off and alarms should start buzzing because there are certain types of debts that you do not want to see on your annual net worth statement.
This is easy enough to understand. You can't have credit card debt.
You can't have credit card debt.
Realize credit card companies charge you 16, 17% interest rates. Those are good investment years. So how are you ever going to get ahead if you're paying them all that interest? Store credit cards. I don't care if they gave you 10% when you signed up for it. More than likely it's a trap because if you forget about the credit card bill or it just gets buried somewhere, you run a lot of risk that you go pay back a lot of interest. You're going to pay back a lot of transaction fees. Be very careful about that. And then don't forget, because I've already kind of alluded to this, if you're the type of person that's a collector, when I say collector, maybe you're the type of person that if you watch TV and they're advertising campers, you're like, I'd like to have
I got to have one of those.
Well, guess what? They probably have it where for $200 a month for the next 20 years, you can own a camper. Just because you can afford $200 a month doesn't mean you need a camper. If you watch another commercial or you go visit a friend and they happen to have a boat and you're like, I need a boat. And that's the thing. You listen to a Chris Jansen song and you're like, I'd like to have a boat too. You could probably do that for $200 a month too, but you will never, absolutely never own your life. So any type of high interest debt on a depreciating asset, that is no-go land that you need to be very careful of when you're looking at your net worth tool.
So I can already hear you guys out there say, guys, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. It's just a little credit card. It's $200 a month. It's $300 a month. Let us show you the dark side of compounding interest. So let's assume that you're a 22-year-old and you have what the average credit card balance is in this country right now. You say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to make the minimum payments on that. So we know that right now the average interest rate on credit cards is a little more than 16%. If you want to make the minimum payment, most credit card companies say you either got to pay $25 or 3% of the outstanding balance. And we know that right now the average outstanding balance for credit cards is about $5,300. So $5,300 that you're paying 16% interest on and you're making a minimum payment. If that were your strategy, it would take you 152 months or almost a little over 12 and a half years to pay off that debt. And instead of only paying off $5,300, you would have spent about $9,000 to satisfy that debt. That's $9,000 that did not show up on your net worth statement. Well, what if you said, you know what, I am a financial mutant and I'm not going to do that. And instead of paying that monthly minimum payment, what if I invested those dollars instead? What if I put that $9,000 to work for me? Well, over that 12 and a half year period, from 22 into your mid-30s, that $9,000 will have turned into $22,000. So now, instead of not having $9,000 on your net worth statement, you've got $22,000 on your net worth statement. But it gets a little bit better. What if you decided to leave that $22,000 in your army of dollar bills working for you? By the time you got to 65, your portfolio, that amount of money could be worth almost $462,000. And remember, all you did was put $9,000 to work for you. And the way you would do that was by not accumulating $5,000 of credit card debt. I'm going to say that differently. $5,000 of credit card debt could cost you almost $500,000 in retirement. These seemingly small decisions are not actually small at all.
Well, but I want to play devil's advocate. That's credit cards. We all know credit cards are horrible.
Sure.
I see this thing. You just tell me $5,000 could actually cost me $461. I'm going to be the type of person that I've heard, because of real estate and what it allows you to do with leverage, meaning let's use debt to create wealth.
Yep.
This is the way. And look, I'm not disputing that this is a very powerful tool, but anything that is that four-letter word of debt, you need to be very fearful of. You need to be scared to death of, because there's a dark side to even good leverage, which is like real estate investing. And we worked together and created an illustration that shows this as well.
Yeah, so let's look at the pros and cons of leverage. Let's say that you purchase $1 million investment property and you only put $200,000 down, so 20% down, and you borrow the rest, right? That's kind of the strategy going on. Well, if you get lucky and things go your way, your property could go up by 20% in value in the first year. Or if you get unlucky, your property could go down by 20% value.
Now, I know that's a big swing, but in some parts of the country right now, we've seen it. We did this for illustrative purposes. We want to show you. But what's crazy is this has actually happened in certain parts of the country, but still, keep going, Bob.
So here is what happens if you're on the positive side of this equation. Because of leverage, your rate of return was actually 100%. And your equity doubles to $400,000. Instead of having only $200,000 of equity, you have $400,000 of equity. That's amazing, and that's the part that the brochure always tells you about. But what happens if you're in that second scenario and the property drops by 20% in value? Because of leverage, your rate of return is actually negative 100%. Your equity in the property now drops to zero. That $200,000 you had into it is now wiped out because you still have debt on the property of more than what the property is worth. So leverage can be an amazing tool that can work for you, but there is a very dark, dark side to it.
So just in summary, you put $200,000 in this thing. If it goes good and you had this 20% year, it'd be cool to watch your 200 turn into 400. You're like, woo! That's amazing. Pretty awesome. On my balance sheet, I've now got an asset that's worth $1.2 million. I owe $800,000 on. That's awesome. But I want to play the other side of this. Imagine you put $200,000 down, so it comes out of something. It came from your cash. It came out of your investments. If the asset actually went down in value, you lost the $200,000 of the down payment. Now the property's worth $800,000. You owe $800,000. You're going to feel pretty sad as you make those monthly payments, knowing that you lost it. Now, look, that's an extreme example. What you're hoping, and anybody who gets into real estate, because I remember when you and I got into commercial real estate, somebody we look up to says, boys, all I'll ask you is that if it gets ugly, can you still make the payments? Because you've got to be able to ride that because the real estate market's not necessarily going to be a V-shaped recovery. It might sit down for a while. You need to be patient, you need to be persistent, and you need to know that you're a long-term investor to handle it. So don't get caught up into the magic of leverage. Go into it eyes wide open so you don't fall into any traps or mistakes.
So remember, we said that there are 3 ways that you can increase your net worth. One is to increase your assets, and the second was to decrease your liabilities. Well, those are both fairly somewhat mathematical. There is a third way to do it, and I would argue this isn't just a way, this is a must, but it's more behavioral than mathematical, and it is don't screw it up. Don't blow it.
Yeah, we just covered how leverage is the siren song to accelerate wealth, and it truly can do it. But there's also a way that it could take you a step back. So we put out the rule of don't screw it up, because there's just going to be a lot of ways that you can build wealth, but there's a lot of traps you can fall into. So we want to kind of give you the guidance of things we've experienced and seen people make mistakes or good things, so you can be aware of it. And the first thing is the day-to-day progress versus the long-term progress.
Yeah, watching your net worth grow is a lot like watching a tree grow. If you stare at it every single day, you might oh, was that a move? Is that good? Is everything okay? You get hyper-focused. You don't actually see any growth. You plant a tree and you walk away and you come back later. Oh, wow, that thing's growing. Oh, wow, that thing's getting bigger. And then enough time passes, you're like, holy cow, when did this giant oak come to be? You had to give it enough time to do what time allows it to do.
I often share, you guys know I'm big on talking about the power of compounding growth and how $1 can become $88. What people don't understand about that is that if you're investing, and this is part of screwing it up, you start investing, you're building your assets, you look at it 10 years in the future, and we know that every decade, there's probably going to be 2 downturns through that decade. And I don't want you, after 10 years of investing, to go, these guys told me I was going to turn $1 into $88, but I'm thinking I'm going to put thousands of dollars, so it's going to be a much bigger pot. 10 years, you're going to get frustrated. This is what I mean by don't screw it up. Don't get frustrated. Lose your consistency. Lose your patience and persistence to where you actually don't get to see the tree grow from the sapling to this big, huge thing. That's what we mean by being careful about understanding that compounding requires time to make this all work.
And another way to not screw it up is don't try to do too much. You might say, oh man, I want my net worth to pop. I'm ready to go. So I'm going to go all in on Bitcoin, or I'm going to go all in on Tesla. I'm going to go all in on fill in the blank. Or you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go take all the equity out of my home and I'm going to put that in the market, because then I'm going to be able to blow. It's okay to build wealth slowly, because when you try to move too fast, when you try to do too much, when you try to be too aggressive, that's when you put yourself in a risky place, in a risky position. And another thing I think that is amazing, I see people do this all the time. They say, guys, I'm at the beginning of my journey. Like I don't have any money. Why would I do a net worth statement? Odds are my net worth statement today is even negative because I'm only 22 years old. The sooner you start tracking it, the sooner you will get excited about continuing to track it. So I would argue, no matter where you are, whether you're that boardroom CEO that's worth $80 million right now, or you're that college graduate that has $80 in your pocket, do your very first net worth statement this year, and I promise you, your future self will not regret it.
I can speak to especially everybody who's out there who you're worried that your net worth might be negative right now, because I get it. I mean, it's a scary thing, and you feel like if you go through this exercise of actually doing the net worth tool, it's going to be kind of sad to see maybe even further behind than you realize. Yeah. And look, I have a self-confession here, because this all gets into the extreme power of activating the invisible hand. When I started my first company, I went to conferences, because let's face it, when you don't know what you're doing, that you feel like, let's get busy doing nothing. Let's just keep going to conferences and learning, and surely somebody will have the solution. And here's a case where they actually did share a solution, but I just didn't want to hear it. And that's kind of what I feel like we're doing with this net worth tool today, is that I went to conferences, and I kid you not, every year they would have you see the same speakers, and they'd say, look, you need to, if you're going to be a successful business owner, write down who your ideal client is. And then I want you to do even better than that. I want you to take that ideal client, compare it to your actual existing clients, and rate them A clients. That's who you're really hoping you attract in the future. B clients, which are good clients, and then you got C clients, or clients that are okay, but you just need to be careful that you don't overload your book with C clients, because they might not fit into everything perfectly. So I heard this, and I went to, I kid you not, this was probably 4 years, 5 years, and I'm like, these guys, I don't have time. And at the time, I was just saying I didn't have time. The reality is I was scared to see what the reality of my situation is. But you know what? After 5 to 6 years of this going on, I said, I'm going to do this exercise. I'm going to prove that this is not what they say it will do. So I recorded my ideal client. I recorded whether my clients were A, B, or C clients. And here's what I realized, guys. 70% of my clients were in that C column. And only between B and A clients, it was 30%.
30%, yeah.
And that was disappointing. So I do the exercise. I fast forward 24 months in the future, and I look at my clients again. This is the part, and this is what I'm talking about, invisible hand. It's flipped. Now I've got 70% of my clients are in that A column, A and B column, and only 30%, not because we went out and started, I don't fire clients. Anybody who knows the Abound Wealth way we do things, we don't fire clients. It's just that we grew in a way. We activated that invisible hand to where I can't tell you what changed, but we started attracting the right type of clients. We started doing the right type of things in business that we grew. The same exact thing happens with net worth statements. I've been tracking my net worth statement since 2006. And it was so fun for me to use this net worth tool and input all of those every year into the system and see how this is activated over the years. It is life-changing. And that's the thing. Don't hear this and be scared of your negative net worth or your low net worth and say, I'm just going to not do this. Get excited that today is the day that you actually start building your wealth journey.
And here's what we've done. We're making available to you the exact template that we use. And I think this is probably my favorite part about the template is the dashboard. Because this dashboard is going to put right in front of you every year the things that you should be focused on and the things that should be top of mind. Like, what's my net worth doing over time? How are my assets growing? How are my liabilities decreasing? What's going on with my liquid assets? Where am I on my journey to abundance? What is my Money Guy accumulator score? How have I built my tax buckets? And then what's my army of dollar bills doing? How potent, how powerful is my army of dollar bills? What's amazing is when you start tracking your net worth. First year, it might not be incredibly exciting. You might be negative. It's just but the second year, you're going to see some progress. You're going to be like, oh, wow, holy cow. And then the third year and fourth year and fifth. And before long, you're going to have 10 years of data in here. You're going to be, holy cow. How did I get here? How did I go from where I was then when I didn't know what in the world I was doing to where I am now? And this is going to remind you every year of why you're making the decisions that you're making and why this can be maybe the most powerful tool in your entire financial arsenal.
I think it's incredible because if you do this exercise, and we have a case study up there on the visual screen, but for all of my podcast listeners and others, you're going to see that, yeah, there's going to be years like in this case where this person lost their job around 2014. And you're going to see that net worth and other things took a hit during that period. But then there's other periods where the net worth spiked by 50% because maybe you got a combination of you saved really and invested really well. The investment marketplace recovered nicely. You get to watch and visually experience every bit of that. That's the stuff that's going to change your life. And I'd really encourage you, take advantage of this because it's not just the CPA in me, it's the part of me that gets very sentimental about the journey because the older you get, you're going to be, I'm telling you, as a person who's approaching his 50s, I started this in 2006 of tracking my annual net worth. I wish I'd have started the year I graduated college. That's what I wish I'd have done. I missed it by about 10 years. We went around the office and asked all of our advisors, are you doing net worth statements? The answer is yes, they are. What was amazing to me, though, is I was talking to some of our primaries. We do have advisors in this building that started the year after graduating college. Right. I'm so jealous that they did that. It took even me as a financial mutant to start 10 years after graduation. Do better. You can use this tool. You can visually see it. It's going to waken up that invisible hand in your brain, and this is what's going to create wealth.
So if you want to use this tool, if you want to have access to it, go to learn.moneyguy.com. We are making it available for $29, and it's not like $29 every year or $29 monthly. For one $29 investment, you get to have this template that you can take and use, and you can build year after year to watch your financial journey grow. And I think you're going to look back 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now and say, holy cow, I can't believe that I've come this far.
Yeah, pricing is one of those things. We did this on purpose. This was one of those that I want everybody who uses it to get finish the exercise and be like, I really got that for $29. I can't believe how affordable. That's on purpose. We talk about the abundance cycle on this show all the time, is that I want to come give you free information. I want to give you very affordable tools, whether it's free on themoneyguy.com/resources, whether it's, affordable tools like the FOO course or even this net worth tool. You go to learn.moneyguy.com. That's all part of the abundance cycle, because you're going to learn, you're going to apply, you're going to grow, and you're going to reach a level of success that we call this the abundance cycle. You're going to remember who planted all these seeds, all these tools. We ask for nothing in return until the fact that when you get that success, you will take the relationship to the next level. I love it because it's a win-win proposition for all of us. We love investing in you because we know that this stuff is good enough. You will be successful if you just follow the steps and if you actually do the exercise and the homework of utilizing the tools we've created for you. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen. Money Guy team, learn, apply, grow, abundance, out.